Hello, and welcome back to you and to me, frankly. I am back stateside. I am here to share with you my journey on what I call my annual sewing project to essentially do a temperature check on whether or not I still dislike sewing. Because I, for the most part, dislike sewing. What am I going to be sewing? I'm going to be sewing a top tube bag for my bicycle. I have a back rack on my bike and a bag that I can store a lot of things in, but I have been really yearning for a bag that is more easily accessible while I'm riding, or even just like when I stop and like want to quickly pull my phone out or want to pull my binoculars out or whatever. And so I thought, first I went to REI to look at top tube bags and felt that they were out of my price range. And I thought then, my next thought was like, well, they don't seem that difficult to make. And then I then Googled DIY top tube bags, and there are a plethora of resources available. And so I am making the Stitchback top tube bag. It's my first time making a bag like this. It's my first time using like very synthetic materials. I'll show you a little bit more in the materials part of this video what I got, and also how much it cost me, and hopefully this works out. Let's talk about materials and supplies. I got most of this stuff. I think almost everything I was able to get from my local fabric store. For the body of the bag, I have an outer fabric and an inner fabric. I am using this material called, Pro Tough, I believe it is called, and it is a woven canvas outdoor fabric, where this is kind of just feels like normal woven cotton, but it is waterproof. So there's kind of like a lined, rubbery inner. I guess the wrong side feels kind of interesting. And then for the inner lining, I am using ripstop. And so I have all of my pattern pieces cut here. This bag is also reinforced with foam, and so I got this from my local craft store. It is just, I believe it's called like Eva foam, and the pattern calls for a foam that's 3/16 of an inch thick, which I could not find, or it was out of stock, and so I ended up getting, I believe these were like 2 or 3 millimeters thick. It's maybe closer to 2. And so my plan is to use 2 pieces of foam in place of 1. I might glue them together to give it a little bit more structure, but we'll see. So I have all those pieces cut out. I got a little piece of webbing, which is what we'll use to make little loops so that you can attach the bag to the bike using Velcro. This is 1 rep Velcro, which means there's no adhesive, which can degrade over time, which we don't want on a bag that will see a lot of the outdoors and will also make contact with my bike. I got some ribbon, which I don't totally understand what I will be using it for. I gotta say, the ribbon is mostly used to make a little tab to put in front of the zipper, but it's also recommending that you bind the inner seams with ribbon. And so I got this to do that with, but I feel that's the step that I feel very nervous about, but we'll see. So I got 2 different widths, 2 different colors, enough for my purposes of both in case to see which one works better, which one doesn't. I got a little piece of bungee cord, which we'll also use to fasten the bike to the bag, and some cord lockers for the bungee. And the last thing, which is what I had to order online because I could not find this in stores, is a heavy duty number 8 zipper. I also feel like I need not say it, but this is like definitively not a tutorial. because I mostly don't know what I'm doing and am not an authority on this whatsoever. So supposedly the first thing we're gonna do is fold, this is the side of the bag. We're gonna fold this in a 1/2 inch and sew it down. I don't feel like I can iron ripstop. Like I feel like it's gonna melt. Do I know that for a fact? No. But do I want to find out? Also, not really. So I'm just kind of finger pressing and hoping for the best. Okay, that was a botched back stitch if I've ever seen one, but it's probably fine. Probably good enough. So next we are going to pin the wrong sides together of the outer and inner fabric and line up the outside edges so that you get this. Oh, I see. There's a flat side and a curved side. I'll fix. Ta-da! I guess I can find out now if the foam fits. And I guess if the foam doesn't fit, then I messed up, right? But if the foam fits, then the foam fits. And the foam fits. So I think that we're good. So next is we're gonna work on the bottom of the bag. And so it's gonna lay like this, and then with each side, kind of goes one side here, and then the other on that side. And then there'll be a zipper on top. And that's the bag. It's like pretty simple, but I still feel like we are very early on in the journey. The next step of the process is attaching the webbing to the bottom of the bag. So this is the bottom of the bag. The webbing is going to go here, and then we're going to do bar tacks every 1 inch or so that you can get pieces of Velcro through the loops. And I'm nervous for my sewing machine, I must say. I think I just have a universal needle in there right now. I think I could find a heavy duty needle somewhere in the ocean of my belongings in my parents' basement right now, but I would much rather not. And so we are going to take it very slowly. So we have done it. If you look there, okay, I would say that I would give myself a C- on this part of the project, because I essentially only actually have 2 slots where the Velcro actually fits. Other ones are too narrow, even though I tried my best, but it's okay, because I think this is most likely where I would put the Velcro anyway, and so I am not too pressed about it, frankly. Pleased to report that my sewing machine survived the ordeal. The next step is to sew the rest of the bottom piece, but I'm actually going to skip ahead to the front because it requires some more webbing and bar tacks, and I want to only need to change the settings on my sewing machine once. And so I'm going to do that now. I gotta say that as much as I think I'm sewing my bar tacks straight, they are really quite wonky. The size of the bar, or the width between bar tacks, matters a little bit less for the, this isn't the front, this is actually sort of the back, that will be towards your handlebars. but the bungee is going to go through this, so it's a little bit less important that the Velcro fits, because I won't be using Velcro as a fastener for this part. This will all make sense when I show you how this actually attaches to the bike, assuming that I end up with a finished project. Okay, so moving on back to the bottom piece. So I have it pinned, and yeah, let us do it. Okay, hello. So we are at this, what I think will be the scariest, maybe the second scariest part of this process. And I have run into, well, it's the first part of the pattern that I have to improvise, or what's the word? Modify, maybe. Very slightly. And so the pattern calls for a zipper, which this is. And something that is interesting is that they use a zipper that is 1.5 inches wide. And my zipper is probably an 1/8 of an inch shy of that width. And so, if anything, right, if I follow the pattern as is, so the next step essentially is to sew the zipper onto these 2 strips of fabric. And so the way that it is in the pattern is I will sew these strips of fabric here like so. So that when I flip it over, you know, the zipper will cover these raw edges, and so on and so forth. And so something that I think is interesting is that the pattern says that this distance here that you're supposed to leave between these 2 pieces of fabric is supposed to be 3/4 of an inch. And I would think, right, that, I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter how wide my zipper is, but I feel like I'm basically missing a step, because I'm supposed to sew it like this, and then this eventually I will sew onto the other side to cover the ends of the zipper. And I believe it's supposed to be the same length. Like these pieces here, once they're sewn on, are supposed to be the same length as this, or same width. But as you can see, it is much wider. And even if I get it really cinched up to the edges, which, like, I'm not sure that I will, it's still about 1/4 of an inch on each side too wide. And so my thought is that I might just sew it as is, and then when I get to this part, I might just, like, when the time comes for me to like start seaming things together, like if this ends up being excess, I can just cut it off, right? Right? Like, I think I'd much rather be in the position where I think I am, where this is too wide, versus being in a position where this is not wide enough, even though I don't think that would be an issue. If it wasn't wide enough, I would just give it a little bit more room. But I just feel like the math isn't mathing on the pattern, and I'm just gonna go with what my gut says. I will say I'm probably gonna focus really hard now, and probably will not document this process, because it's such a setup with the camera and trying to do things at the same time. And so I will come back when this part is over. Okay, folks, so I feel silly about my last clip, because all I had to do was look up how to sew a zipper. And that answered my questions. And so however, I have ended up with a piece that is too narrow, which makes sense given the diagram that was in the pattern. But I feel like I learned the lesson the hard way, but I think it is the way in which I needed to learn this lesson. And so what I will do next is obviously rip out these seams. I am frankly just going to cut out new side panels for the zipper, because I want to make them a little bit wider just to give myself some wiggle room. So if I do have excess, I can just cut it down to size when the time comes. And I'm not going to reuse these, because this waterproofing I don't think really kind of mends itself after we rip out the stitches. So I have learned a lesson. It needed to be done, and we will move on and redo this. Okay, we did it. And by it, I mean we have correctly sewn the zipper. I am entertaining the idea of doing a line of top stitch so it sits flat, but I don't know that I will. We'll see. I definitely am glad that I gave myself a little bit of wiggle room when I recut these pieces, because something happened while I was sewing, and one part, I think the top is narrower than the bottom, and so I'm gonna have to trim it down to size. But we're getting there. This is a zipper if I've ever seen one. I wonder if now would be the time to bind. I could bind this with ribbon now, but will I? Okay, so I followed my heart and only stitched part way and then the other part way, and I feel like that was the right move, because like otherwise I don't know. I don't otherwise know what would have happened, but this seems correct. Maybe? So the next step of the pattern is to essentially sew a piece of ribbon, like so. Oh geez, sorry, I'm trying to hold my phone with one hand and film this with another. Is to essentially sew a piece of ribbon here, which to me is completely and entirely baffling, because this is just hard plastic. Like, there's no meaningful way for me to affix this. And I think if this wasn't here and it was just like zipper teeth, I might be able to do it, but I am not going to be able to do this here. And so one thing I could do, it's like if I want the look of the ribbon, is I could affix that. So this is the next piece that's getting attached here, which is gonna, very similarly to the top, is gonna get attached like so. And what I could do, right, is affix the ribbon onto this piece and then sew this all down, and like that might achieve what I'm going for, but I'm not sure if I want to go through the trouble. Like, doing this part was challenging enough as it was. But we'll see. Geez. Okay. It looks okay from the front. It does not look okay from the back. I also had less success for some reason on this side. So we are going to resort to doing some hand stitching. I'm probably still not going to be able to go through this, but I think I can at the very least get pretty close so that everything feels secure. Yeah. If there's something I don't like, if there's something I like less than machine sewing, it's hand sewing. But at least I'll feel in control, eh? A little bit of hand sewing later. I think this is as good as it's gonna get. The next step is going to be adding this zipper cover, which goes on this side, respectfully. I think like so, more or less. And then after that is assembly. The finish line is near, but I fear the hardest part is still yet to come. Although I think this might have literally been the hardest part. So, yeah. Okay. Hello. The time has come for assembly. So I have pinned the first piece in place. It doesn't look like much now. I'm nervous for me, but whatever happens, happens. Oh! Something got stuck. Yikes. Everything's fine. It's not great. It's not bad. Could be worse, right? Could always be worse. I'm gonna go back in and clip this some more after all is said and done. But that looks like one half of a bag. Okay, I'm gonna do the other side. My dudes, I have done an extremely rookie thing, which is my zipper is definitively in upside down. Which means that when it's on my bike, I will have to zip up to open it, which is counterintuitive. But also, I think I am rolling with it because odds are whenever I'm opening this, I will be stopped on my bike. I will not be opening this while riding. And so I can live with this error. But, the foolishness. Hello, folks. The bag takes shape. As you can see more clearly the error of my ways, because essentially the bag will be facing me as it is facing you. And it is counterintuitive to zip up to open and pull down to close. But alas. I hope that the next time I check in, this is complete. Hello, everyone. It is the next day because I think last I left you all, it was like 9 p.m. I had been working on the bag for probably 6 hours and needed to take a step away. So where I left you off, I think I was in the midst of assembly. I am still in the midst of assembly, but we've made some more progress, and it's looking like a bag. Something that I did not share is that I have also started binding the seams with some ribbon, and it very much so needs it because, as you can see, the parts that are unbound have a lot of loose, errant, fraying threads and edges, and so I am going to have to bind these as well. The last part I need to sew on is the back of the bag, and then we will flip it inside out. I did have to get in here again with some hand sewing in the corners because it was just like too bulky and awkward to get into the machine. Here, I'm just gonna flip it inside out so you can kind of see where we're at with the bag. It is coming together. Obstacles notwithstanding. So I'm feeling good about finishing it, being well on my way to finishing the bag. So here we are. This is what it looks like. Right side's out. Looks like a bag, I gotta say. Don't we think? I think so. I think so. So, very exciting. There it all is, pinned into place. Okay, final edge. We have a fully assembled bag. Ah! Okay. I'm gonna try to flip it inside out and see how everything's looking before I bind the seams. So here it is. That's a tube bag, all right. Far from perfect, but totally functional. See what it's looking like in there. The only things left will be to bind. I think I'm really only going to do these 2 long seams that are in the bottom of the bag. I'm not going to bother with this one because I think it's just going to create way too much bulk when I go to try to flip it again. And like, this is going to see, this edge, this face will see less wear and tear than the bottom of the bag. And then I have to install the bungee, I have to install the Velcro, and then add the foam. The one thing I will need to do, it gives you a pattern for cutting out the foam to fit into the 2 sides and the bottom of the bag. However, I do believe my pieces of foam are now too large and I need to cut them down a little bit in order for them to fit in the bag. But we have a bag! We have something that looks like a bag! How about it? We've run into a hiccup, which is that the pockets that I have sewn for my foam have I accidentally caught the inner lining when I was sewing this piece on. So I'm gonna have to unpick most of this and do it again. But it wasn't that hard. Sewing this piece on was not nearly as hard as these pieces. And so I'm feeling okay about that. And now I understand what the pattern meant by avoid catching the inner components. Okay, we're back and all foam slots are free. Excellent. Okay, the foam is in the bag. It has structure, and I have also finished binding most of the seams. I just didn't do the seams where the foam enters, and I think I feel okay about that. Ooh! I think we have the finished bag. It is far from perfect, but dare I say it is functional? I would say it's mostly functional. It's not like perfect, and I think it will have its quirks for use, but I think it, for the most part, does what I need it to do. It opens and closes. This is what the inside looks like. It'll fit my phone, it'll fit my wallet, it'll fit my binoculars, which is all I really need it to do. And yeah, I think I will show you all how this will fit on my bike. And I will do a breakdown of materials and cost in case you're interested. I'm glad it's over. I'll say that much. Here is the finished top tube bag affixed to my bike. Here you can see it. So the front fastener is just a bungee with a cord stopper that goes around the stem, and then I have two pieces of Velcro here that go against the frame. I might need to trim these. My cable housing for my bike rides right under the top tube, and so I just made sure that the Velcro went in the space between the cable housing and the frame, just so I'm not putting any pressure or tension on the cable housing. As you can see, here's where I aired a little bit, and my zipper is upside down, but I think it's not that big of a deal. And yeah, I think this will do the job. Cool. We've come to the end of this project, and I thought it will be at least interesting to me, might be interesting to you, to talk a little bit about what this project cost me, because a huge part of me taking on this project to begin with was cost. I am looking to save money currently in my life, and I looked at the spread of ready-made top tube bags available to me and thought, perhaps I could make this for less money. And is that the case? We will find out. I spent a total of about $38 on supplies alone. I'm not including things like thread or needles or pins and like things that I already have, just things that I bought exclusively for this project. And so $38, that also includes the price of the pattern. At face value, I was a little bit surprised because when I was looking at ready-made top tube bags, it kind of seemed like $40 was about the low end of bags that you could buy. And so I thought, ooh, maybe it's not such a great value. But then I have a lot of leftover materials, and I think I could easily make a second bag with what I have left over. I think it would be a stretch to make a third, but I think definitely could make two bags. The only thing I would need to buy additionally is another zipper because I only bought one. And I think the zipper was perhaps the single most expensive item. Everything else was quite inexpensive alone. Usually kind of hovering, I mean, the webbing and ribbon and all of that was cents. I think I used just quarter yards of fabric, and so that all kind of came out to be about $5 or less per parcel. So ultimately, if I'm thinking about it as cost per bag, which is actually closer to, would it be $19? That feels like a good value in terms of outright cost. I'm not including labor. It's hard for me to quantify labor. Of course, if you're like a more comfortable, more efficient, and more effective sewer, this would be a lot smaller of an undertaking. As someone who is inexperienced, this took me close to 8 hours to complete. I think that if you were more competent, it could easily take half that amount of time. But, you know, at the end of the day, I get the self-satisfaction, right, that I have made my own bag for my bike, which, as they say, is priceless. All of that said, I think a lot of the things that I said in the beginning of this video still hold true. I don't think this project has changed my attitude or outlook about sewing. I still don't really enjoy it that much as an activity or a hobby. And that's okay. I think for me, sewing is a very good exercise in shaking the chains of perfectionism, the shackles of perfectionism. I think it's an activity where I really let myself make mistakes and learn from them. And it's a shame that I do it so infrequently, because sometimes I feel like I make mistakes and learn from them in that moment, but I don't necessarily carry those lessons with me to the next project, because it, might be months, if not years, between projects. It's just kind of always a little bit of a push and pull of like me being really anxious about sewing, so I don't do it that often. And then when I do it, I'm still anxious, and it kind of reinforces that sewing is scary. And so if you have any tips on breaking out of that negative feedback loop, let me know. For some reason, like coming out, like ultimately ending up with like functional, if not like nice finished objects, like to me has not yet been able to justify the emotional turbulence that I experience with sewing. And it's also possible that sewing just might not ever be for me, and it might just be a hobby that I'll let go of entirely one day. But every year for, I think, like the last 5 years, I've done one sewing project to see if anything's changed. And I gotta say, this year it's not any different, and that's okay. So I have a top 2 bag now. I'm going to be going on a very exciting to me birthday bike trip shortly. I will likely try to vlog that because I really like watching biking content, or like casual, fun biking content. I am by no means a serious cyclist. And so stay tuned for that if you want to see my 2 bag in action. Thanks so much for watching. I will see you in the next one.